start this plenary session number 3. And my name is Stefan Schweinfest. I'm the director of the UN Statistics Division in the UN Secretariat of GGIM. So I'm very happy to see all of you here. We have a great session here, so you did the right thing coming here. The title of our session is Supporting Sustainable Development and the Well-Being of Society, Embracing Digital Transformation and Technological Development, Environmental and Climate Changes. Now you may say, I've heard that title before. And actually, those 3 key themes, we have been discussing them in all of our plenary sessions, and there is a little bit of method to this madness. We wanted to hear as many different voices, and the key word behind the philosophy of bringing this up several times and packaging these 3 topics, sustainability, well-being, digital transformation, and environment and climate into one session is integration. I think the idea, how do we integrate all of these richness of data at the country level, at the global level, how do we bring that all together and bring it to the right place where it can be applied? So in order to discuss today, we have a fantastic panel, and I have to admit or plead guilty that if you looked at your programs very carefully, you will have seen that there is a change. There are 2 changes in name. So I have to admit that we have 2 people here, Albert and Sydney, who jumped in at the last minute because we had other speakers planned and they were not able to be here with us. So I just wanted to thank you a lot for doing this, and it's just a testament to this community that, number 1, you are very versatile, and number 2, we are helping each other out when it is needed. So let me introduce the speakers to you. We have, of course, the first one is Deirdre. By now, she is also world famous. She is from the chief of the Geography Division of the US Census Bureau, and she is one of our co-chairs for the high-level group on the IGIF, and so as a total GGIM person. Then we have Albert Momo, the Vice President and Executive Director of Trimble. And we have Sydney Simelane, Professional Land Survey and former Surveyor General of the Kingdom of Eswatini, and now he is the Principal Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture. So you can see we have a fantastic panel in the sense that it is very rich and very diverse. We have different perspectives here. We have government and private sector. We have data producers and data users. We have a social perspective and a more environmental perspective. And we have developed country perspectives and developing country perspectives. So if you don't take advantage of this wisdom and knowledge and experience by asking lots of difficult questions, well, they don't have to be difficult. They have to just be good questions. Then I can really not help you. So I'm looking forward to very active participation. You know by now the drill. We will have 3 presentations and hopefully inspire you. And then after that, we will have perhaps a little chat here on the podium. And then we will certainly open it and answer all the questions that you may have. So please feel free, feel engaged to be part of this session. And then without further ado, I can ask Deirdre to start with the first presentation. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be here with you this morning. As we prepare to close the session of the Congress today, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of all of the delegates in attendance to thank our wonderful hosts. The Government of India and all of its representatives here in attendance, the United Nations Statistics Division, and of course the UNWGIC Secretariat, the sponsors that made so much of this possible, and of course all of the speakers that made the presentation so inviting and engaging. I'd also like to thank the staff here that have helped us, that have welcomed us and made us feel so at home throughout the conference. We've had an extraordinary week of presentations, of cultural events, flavorful cuisine, and I believe we've all felt very welcomed and appreciated. So let's give our hosts a round of applause, please. As Stefan mentioned, our challenge today is to tie together the overall Congress theme, geo-enabling the global village, no one should be left behind, along with the sub-themes of the Congress and the 9 strategic pathways of the IGIF. Let's start by taking a moment to think about this concept of the global village. We are now more physically and digitally connected than ever before in our history, with international commerce, the internet, migration and travel, and social media platforms. In many ways, this global connectivity has fueled a wonderful diversity of perspectives, creativity, innovation, and economic growth. But I would like to pose 2 questions for you to consider. First, what about those that are not connected? How do we ensure that they are not left behind? And second, how does this connectivity impact us in other ways? Together, we are facing unprecedented and increasingly complex and interconnected challenges. The impacts of climate change are widespread and felt throughout the world, with frequent droughts, storms, and other natural disasters, flooding, forest fires, crop failures, and resulting food insecurity. Health security has been front and center since the COVID-19 pandemic, which spread like wildfire throughout our very connected world. Energy security and renewable energy are becoming increasingly important because of increased demand and the impacts energy consumption has on our world. Our digital connectivity has created unprecedented digital security issues, as well as digital equity issues, with some still not able to benefit from that digital connectivity. And we still have work to do. Because we're so connected, challenges in one country often spill over and have ripple effects in many other countries and often around the world. For example, a major disaster or national security issue in one country can impact regional or global food supplies, energy supplies, international commerce and supply chains, inflation, and global financial markets. So how can we better manage these challenges to ensure sustainable social, economic, and environmental development, leaving no one behind? By implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In 2015, all United Nations member states adopted the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which lays out 17 sustainable goals and 169 associated targets to achieve a better future for the planet and for our people, to attain peace and prosperity, and to build strong partnerships. These goals brought attention and focus to our global challenges, serving as a universal call to action for people worldwide to address these critical areas of importance by 2030. Some progress has been made against these goals since 2015, but not enough. And now let's consider 2 additional questions. How can we help to achieve the SDGs by 2030? And how can we better and more effectively measure, monitor, and report progress on the SDGs? We can help by geo-enabling our global village. Technology and data available today allow us to combine information about people, businesses, healthcare, and weather with information about location, providing a very powerful tool to answer critical global challenges. Examples of the statistical data include population data, such as age, race, and gender, housing data, such as owner versus renter, education, income, poverty, and employment data, all of the data that's called for in the SDGs. Examples of geospatial or location data include addresses, roads, legal boundaries, satellite imagery, parcel boundaries, cell phone locations, all of the data that's called for in the IGIF. When you bring them together, the result is powerful tools and visualizations that help explain the story, what's happening in our world and where. It helps to answer the difficult questions and to respond to our global challenges. So the question then becomes, how do we go about geo-enabling our global village? Through the Integrated Geospatial Information Framework, or IGIF. It helps to do just that, to geo-enable our countries. The IGIF was developed by the United Nations to help countries integrate information about people and their location, and to effectively enable policy formulation, decision-making, and innovation. The IGIF is endorsed by the UNWGIC Committee of Experts as a globally developed and consulted framework that helps countries build and strengthen their geospatial information management capabilities and related resources to help deliver that sustainable social, economic, and environmental development that leaves no one behind. As we've heard through this week, the IGIF consists of 3 interrelated parts. First, the overarching strategic framework, which answers the question, why? Why is this important? Second, the implementation guide, which answers the question, what? What actions need to be taken to build and strengthen geospatial information management capabilities? And third, country-level action plans. Those help the countries lay out the how, the when, and the who will implement the necessary actions, taking into consideration national circumstances and priorities. Let's take a closer look at the 3 component parts of the IGIF. Part 1 is the overarching strategic framework, providing an overview of the IGIF and why it's important. It lays out our vision for the future that includes the efficient use of geospatial information by all countries to achieve sustainable development, leaving no one behind. And it presents a mission, the mission statement that is a call to action for our member states to promote and support innovation and provide the necessary leadership to achieve the vision. It highlights strategic drivers behind the development of the IGIF, like national and global development agendas. The overarching strategic framework also highlights the underpinning principles and the goals of the IGIF, like knowledge transfer and enhanced communication. Finally, it provides an overview of the 9 strategic pathways of the IGIF, which is what I'd like to provide a little bit more information on now. Part 2 of the IGIF, the implementation guide, outlines the 9 strategic pathways of the IGIF in detail and describes the actions that can be taken to strengthen national geospatial information management in the areas of governance, technology, and people for both developing countries and as well as countries that have already successfully implemented spatial data infrastructure capabilities. The implementation guide provides resource materials, best practices, and guiding principles, and recommends actions and outcomes that serve as a roadmap for implementing the IGIF. With a focus on the ability for geospatial information to be integrated with other meaningful data to solve problems, the IGIF acts as a catalyst for economic growth and opportunity and stimulates improved understanding and decision-making for national development priorities and the SDGs. Part 3, the country-level action plan, details how the actions will be carried out, when and by whom. It contains processes, resource materials, sample templates, and examples that align with national priorities and circumstances. Since the first member state began implementing the IGIF in 2018, the momentum has continued to grow. With the help of the UNWGIC Secretariat, the World Bank, Cart4Ket, and other supporting organizations, the number of countries has increased significantly, with approximately 40 member states actively working to advance the IGIF within their countries. The most recent grouping of 17 countries is part of the SDG Data Alliance that you heard about yesterday from the Public Foundation. The SDG Data Alliance is a multi-stakeholder partnership between the Kellogg Foundation, ESRI, the Public Foundation, the CHIA Network, and the United Nations to help advance the Sustainable Development Goals. The IGIF plays an integral role in the alliance, helping countries to strengthen geospatial information management capabilities and report progress on the SDGs. Work has begun in 17 countries across Africa, Asia Pacific, Latin America, and the Caribbean, with a goal to engage more countries as part of the SDG Data Alliance, so the momentum continues to grow. For many countries, the IGIF is transformational. It helps them respond to the global challenges I highlighted earlier, as well as other pressing needs within their countries. Here you will see a word cloud of testimonials obtained from final reports of countries implementing the IGIF. I know it's a lot of words, so I'll break it down a little. When you look closely, you'll notice some common themes in these words. The first theme is around partnerships, collaboration, and coordination, which is an important element of the IGIF. Another prominent theme is improved geospatial information management. You'll see words like centralized geospatial data, integrated data, and accessible and useful data. There are also many words around the theme of better government. You'll notice efficiency, improved policy planning, citizen-centered, cost savings. Another theme woven throughout these words is improved government services and response. You'll see faster emergency dispatch, improved healthcare delivery, and better reporting to the Sustainable Development Goals. Finally, innovation is front and center in these words. You'll see forward thinking, advanced technology, transformation, new jobs, investment, and economic growth. All of these words were shared by countries implementing the IGIF. The transformative nature of the IGIF often draws national media coverage. Here you'll see national newspaper and television coverage of the IGIF and the SDG Data Alliance in Eswatini and Burkina Faso, both landlocked African nations struggling with the impacts of climate change, food insecurity, poverty, and healthcare response. These ministers are highlighting the important role of the IGIF for innovation, improved policy formulation, business, national development, decision-making, management of climate change, and sustainable development, and the well-being of all citizens. Now I'd like to share how the principles and pathways we've discussed so far came together in a real-world example. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we put the principles and the pathways of the IGIF to work in Central America to help member states respond to the pandemic. The United States Census Bureau and the National Institute of Statistics and Geography of Mexico, along with several other partners, provided leadership and support for the Central America Integration Project. All of the Central American countries, with the exception of Belize, participated in this project, with a goal of integrating statistical and geospatial information from across multiple ministries to help inform decision-making and response to the pandemic. By integrating these statistical and geospatial information data sets, countries were able to identify populations more vulnerable to COVID-19 by calculating a vulnerability index at different levels of geography. While 6 of the IGIF pathways guided this project, let's take a look at 3: partnerships, data, and innovation. I'm going to spend a few minutes on this slide because it pulls together the pieces of the IGIF and puts them into practice. If you think back to the word cloud of testimonials I shared a few minutes ago, you will recall terms like improved data sharing, centralized geospatial data, and improved healthcare delivery. I'll show you how we were able to make great strides in these areas using the strategic pathways of the IGIF as our guide. First, let's start with partnerships. Prior to this project, there had been little to no partnerships, collaboration, or communication occurring between the agencies and ministries within these countries. As a result of this work, we had geospatial agencies, statistical agencies, health ministries, and emergency response ministries all working together and collaborating, in many cases for the very first time. Not only did this partnership, collaboration, and communication occur within each country, but we had unprecedented cross-country partnership, collaboration, and communication occurring across Central America. We also had support and funding from the Pan American Institute of Geography and History, as well as support from the UNWGIC America's Regional Committee, the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, and the National Administrative Department of Statistics in Colombia. Second, let's consider the data pathway. To effectively respond to the pandemic, the countries needed to effectively integrate their data, including the demographic information, health characteristics, and geographic data. This required cooperation and permission for the sharing of data across different agencies and ministries. We had to consider who was most vulnerable to COVID-19 and what characteristics would best inform vulnerability, such as populations over the age of 60, households with overcrowded living conditions, and persons living at or below the poverty level. We also needed to understand the location piece of the equation, or the geography. We needed to identify specific areas at different levels of geography that contained more people vulnerable to COVID-19. We asked the countries to aggregate their data down to the lowest level of geography possible. We also asked them to collect other helpful information, like location data, such as transportation hubs that might impact the spread of COVID-19, and also hospital, clinic, and pharmacy locations for treatment and response. Finally, let's look at the innovation pathway. Once a country had collected and standardized their data per a defined data structure that we developed during this project, we were able to use innovative technologies and techniques to analyze the data and inform decisions. The data was uploaded to a centralized geo portal. This portal allowed us to work collaboratively and to provide innovative tools and applications. For example, we developed an ArcGIS tool that allowed countries to easily select data variables that would inform vulnerability for a specific level of geography, and then easily calculate vulnerability based on those variables. Then countries were able to visualize the vulnerability results in ArcGIS Online and conduct analysis using innovative web maps, dashboards, and story maps. Let's see what that looked like. Specifically in Costa Rica, by integrating statistical and geospatial information, Costa Rica was able to identify populations more vulnerable to COVID-19 by calculating a vulnerability index at the district level. This map displays the results, with the districts of highest vulnerability in the darkest shades of red, and the districts of least vulnerability in pink. Our colleagues then overlaid their hospital and clinic locations to inform decision makers about areas that did or did not have easy access to health care. The results were very unexpected to the health ministry in Costa Rica. As you can see, many of the highly vulnerable districts, the darkest red, do not have immediate access to a hospital or clinic. This map helped inform decision makers and enabled them to more effectively manage the COVID-19 pandemic. It allowed them to provide faster emergency response and to improve the delivery of health care. The Central American countries that participated in this project now more fully understand the benefits of the pathways and the principles of the IGIF. And as a result, several of these countries are now working to more fully advance the IGIF within their countries, including Panama, Honduras, and Guatemala. I hope today's presentation helps explain the value of the IGIF in geo-enabling the global village and supporting sustainable development and the well-being of society while leaving no one behind. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and share it with you today.
Thank you very much, Deirdre. And I think we have to declare you Global IGIF Ambassador because, I mean, you very eloquently and passionately explain what this framework is all about. And I'm sure everybody in this room will leave the room thinking IGIF, 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 how do I do that in my country? And I always like that you also confirm that it's not only a tool for developing countries, but you had just shared with me in the communication leading up to this panel how you in the United States are also starting to use this tool, and perhaps we can say a few words about that in our discussion later, because I think it is very important also for us as the United Nations that we create tools that are for all countries, because that then also creates the possibility of sharing information and so. And of course you touched on a topic that is dear to my heart, the integration of statistical and geospatial information, and we may come back to that also. But now we want to hear the private sector perspective. I mean, Albert, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stefan. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. I was not supposed to be here, but I am. So when I was asked a couple of days ago to present here and to be part of this panel, I was doing something else, and the email pops up, and I just reply, yes, I'm available. And later on, I read the entire email, including the title of this panel, and I was like, what? What am I going to talk about? And then I read the title again, and I noticed that they have digital transformation in there. And I said, yes. Because I happen to work for a company that considers itself one of the pioneers of the expression digital transformation. And to make it really clear, the subtitle that I put on my presentation, Transforming the Way the World Works, is actually the motto of Trimble. I'm not going to make a presentation on Trimble. That's not what you guys are here for. But I'm going to try with a couple of slides that I put together to explain why the world can be transformed digitally. And I'm going to focus specifically on some sectors that I think our geospatial technology in general can help transforming. And in order to do that, I'm going to go back in the past and mention the industrial revolutions. So the first one was in 1765, the second in 1870, the third one in 1969, and now we are living in what we call the fourth industrial revolution. Looking at the three previous revolutions, the first revolution used water and steam power to mechanize production. So that was all about mechanization. The second one was the use of electric power to create mass production. And the third one was the use of electronics and information technology to automate production. So what is the fourth industrial revolution? So it's a digital revolution. So, part of the expression digital transformation, that's actually what starts. So it's a digital revolution. It's a technology that connects, the physical, the digital, and the biological spheres. Some people will tell you digital transformation is actually connecting the digital and the physical world. Another expression of Trimble, right? And so there are so many things that comes with the fourth industrial revolution. But overall, people are more connected, and we have to think about processes and about speed and things of that nature. Some of the elements of digital transformation of the fourth industrial revolution are artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, and the list is long. So when we say digital transformation, it's basically how can we use these technologies to make life better for everybody. And that's a good representation of some of those technologies. And like I say, digital transformation is really about connecting the digital and the physical worlds. Through digital transformation, and because you guys want me to talk also about development, so these are what we plan to achieve. So with digital transformation, we think we can improve productivity almost across the board. And so it will create economic breakthroughs, it will improve quality, safety, and compliances, and of course, it will help with all the environmental issues that we face. Now, bringing digital transformation to the geospatial world, there are three main elements that the geospatial industry brings to the digital transformation. The first one is positioning and remote sensing in general. So that's the what part of our approach. And of course, we do a lot of modeling, and we have all those software that are used for design and for scheduling and for improving processes. And of course, the last part that is coming through now and more is, of course, analytics and optimizations. So if you understand those three pieces, you understand the role of geospatial technologies, of geospatial industry in the digital transformation. So now allow me to go through some specific sectors and talk about the way we think we can digitally transform them. So these are the 5 main sectors that I want to talk about, and then I will expand a little bit more in some sectors that we consider emerging industries. So geospatial, our core activity. So we can bring solutions to improve cadastral and land administration, of course, GIS and mapping, and everybody here is aware of all the development on the GIS and mapping arena. Surveying is now becoming more and more connected to, used to the technology that are changing almost on the yearly basis. We do more 3D modeling and imaging, and of course we have improved topographic, and we do better data analysis and reporting. So when it comes to geospatial, yes, with digital transformation, we are digitally transforming the work of geospatial professionals. Agriculture, everyone here is probably aware of 2 main elements in agriculture. The first one that we want to get credit for is what is called precision agriculture. And precision agriculture is almost everything that you see on the bottom of my slide. But the idea is, how can we improve productivity by using geospatial technology? And we found out that we are able to improve that productivity by around 30%, reducing the water usage, reducing fertilizers, and by making sure that you put the exact amount of water or the exact amount of fertilizer that the soil needs. So we are really transforming agriculture by pushing for digital, for precision agriculture. The second one where we are also very active is what they call climate smart agriculture. Climate smart agriculture here is the use also of geospatial technology and Earth observation to be able to do a lot of predictive analysis that are very helpful when it comes to agriculture. So once again, our sector is really helping in transforming agriculture. Construction is very important because of how much money people put, and organizations and countries put in heavy construction. It's important to find ways to reduce cost and to do a better job. And on that aspect, the use of geospatial technology is also a way to improve productivity there. So, and we help from the design of a project all the way to maintenance and operation. So we help with feasibility and planning, the surveying, and like I said, during construction and maintenance of and operation of those structures. So another sector that we can consider a good recipient of digital transformation. Building, design, construction, operation. Here also we have a lot of software that can be used to improve the processes, to improve data flow when it comes to to design, build, and operate some buildings. So I don't want to name any software here, just because I don't want to do any publicity. But you all are aware of tools that exist out there that make the work of architects, the work of contractors much easier because of our geospatial technology. And transportation and logistics, this is also a sector that benefits a lot from what the technology is bringing. And I have some numbers there, 30% improvement from productivity, asset utilization, and compliance, 30% reduction on fuel use, on CO2 emission and unclaimed cost, and of course, more empowerment for field workers and customers. And we have solutions that goes from fleet, long-haul trucking, to reporting, and to fleet management. So once again, another area where the use of geospatial technology is really transforming a sector. So those are the main sectors that we think of when we see geospatial industry being part of the digital transformation. But there are some emerging sectors that you may not be aware of, where I think there is also now a way to take advantage of what we have to offer. So this is a list, and I'm going to go through some of them to just explain how we can make the work, we can transform those industries, and we can make work easier for people who are using that. So water and wastewater utilities, these are some of the improvements that the use of geospatial technology is bringing to that sector. And more, we have water utilities company coming to us and say, how can we do our job better? How can we use your technology to improve the way we provide our services? And it goes from being able to detect leaks, being able to do mobile mapping and create, the map of all the water facilities and things of that nature. So yes, we can use our geospatial technology to digitally transform water utilities everywhere. Electric utilities, same thing here. For a long time, the only use that electric utilities had of geospatial technology was trying to create shape files of their lines, for example. But now we found out that you can do more than just putting together a network of an electric network. You can use geospatial technology not only to do data collection, but also asset management, and there's a lot of mobile solutions that are used by electric utilities. So once again, another sector that we can really affirm that because of the geospatial technology, we are transforming that sector. Field service is really obvious that with mobile mapping, mostly, now there are so many things that are much easier to do. You can collect more, you can collect better, and you can create a lot of value-add services because of the technology that we bring into the field services. So once again, another sector that we can claim is transformed due to geospatial technology. Last but not least, we can transform government. We mentioned asset management. We mentioned all those mobile solutions. We mentioned the emergency management, and with COVID and other elements, we know how important is it to be able to do emergency management. And once again, of course, land administration is an important element. And when we say transforming government, it's government at every stage, right? It can be a national or federal government, it can be a local government, it can be a municipality. So we have solutions that should make your work better. So all that being said, our goal, even though sometimes people don't believe it, but our goal as private sector is also to enable a sustainable future. And we're doing that by providing clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, industry innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, and responsible production and consumption, and changing climate and action. Yes, the private sector can be part of the solution. And just like everyone in this room, we have a responsibility to leave our world better than we found it. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert, for these insights. When somebody from the private sector talks, at the beginning I always get a little bit scared because I'm always afraid you are taking off into outer space, which is partly also your responsibility. I think your contribution is clearly to show us the way. I mean, where does the future lead us? And then but you brought us back and made the connection to our current, very down-to-earth developmental challenges and showed how digital transformation and technological development can help us. And this is the essence of the public-private partnerships that we are always talking about. Now, you were talking about agriculture, and that makes it very easy for me to build a bridge to the person sitting next to you. Sydney just jumped over the fence, in a way. He was the Surveyor General of Eswatini, but now he's just been promoted to being the Principal Secretary of the Ministry of Agriculture. So you moved from the producer side to the user side of data. So, and I'm sure that is the basis of numerous very interesting insights that you are going to share with us. Sydney, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Stefan, for that introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a privilege to experience both sides of geospatial information, where you are actually the producer of the data, and later on you get to a point where you experience how you maybe become a user of the data. I am going to share with you our experiences in the Kingdom of Eswatini on a brief presentation here, which is the impact of environmental and climate change challenges in the Kingdom of Eswatini. Just for the benefit of those who may not know where Eswatini is, it is a small country nicely tucked between South Africa and Mozambique. We have a total area of 17,364 square kilometers and a population of 1.1 million people. It is an agro-based economy. So you can see that our agriculture at the end of the day becomes very important. We got our independence from the United Kingdom in 1968, and when we celebrated our 50th independence in 2018, the country was renamed from Swaziland to Eswatini, which is basically a Swati version of Swaziland. I don't know how I can explain this, but after having read this profound statement here by the Secretary General of the United Nations, I think this is one of the best ways to depict the situation as far as climate change is concerned in the world. It reads, I have seen many scientific reports in my time, but nothing like this. Today's IPCC report is an atlas of human suffering and damning indictment of failed climate leadership. With fact upon fact, this report reveals how people and the planet are getting clobbered by the climate change. Nearly half of humanity is living in the danger zone right now. Many ecosystems are at the point of no return right now. Unchecked carbon pollution is forcing the world's most vulnerable on a frog march to destruction. Right now, the facts are undeniable. I think there's not much you can say except for that it is time to act, it is time to do something as we speak, because we can already feel the impact of these challenges. I am forced to say that this is a problem of our making that has already started affecting us and will affect our future generations as well as other inhabitants of the planet Earth. You're looking at these animals here, the elephants. They've never been involved in the production or in any form of carbon emission. But at the end of the day, they shall suffer the brunt of these effects. Now, looking at the Kingdom of Eswatini, we have got to a point where we think we want to do something in terms of adaptation due to the climate change impact. So adaptation is the priority for Eswatini, a country that is experiencing the impact of climate change, including increased intensity and frequency of extreme weather events. Climate hazards faced by the country include droughts, floods, landslides, heat waves, wildfires, invasive species, and epidemics. The capital city in Eswatini is called Mbabane. There is a small creek or river that runs through the city, and after which the city was named. It is called Mbabane River. Now, when there was physical planning for the establishment of this city, the thinking was that there's not much river or there's not much water flowing through this river, and for some reason the planning was not able to cater for flooding. So after having gone through these experiences with climate change, we reached a point whereby the drainage system has had to be redesigned in the whole city, because at some point in time when these heavy rains come, almost every shop in the city is flooded. So they've had to redesign the drainage system. The government has established policies, strategies, and action plans to encourage adaptation action, including the National Climate Change Policy of 2016 and the National Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan of 2015 to 2020. I just want to make this statement here that all of these policies, strategies, and action plans are in vain without geospatial information, because these occurrences take place somewhere. So without the availability of geospatial information, it would be difficult and probably close to impossible to achieve some of these plans that we have in mind. The country has focused on a number of sectors to try and address or mitigate the climate change effects. We have focused on water, ecosystems and biodiversity, health, infrastructure, and of course, agriculture. Now, what really happens in terms of water, the main factor is the increase in the temperatures. Temperature rise leads to a greater evaporation rate and plant transpiration, which results in water loss in soil and plants. So water becomes a concern. Increased evaporation due to high temperature increases the atmosphere's capacity to hold water. Now, as a result, sometimes you find that increased evaporation may dry out some areas and fall as excess precipitation in other areas in the country. We have experienced this in a very sad way. What we would normally have is clearly defined season. We knew what time winter started, we knew what time summer started, but now because of these climate change effects, it is really difficult to predict what is going to happen. And the way the rains come now, it is in a very, very different pattern. They are frequent, and the intensity of these rains is very high. So that is, these are new observations that we are making. Again, now impact of climate change on ecosystems and biodiversity. We are realizing that rising temperatures cause a shift from the normal living conditions of ecosystems. This results in either expansion or a decrease in the geographical range of specific type of habitats. Both conditions are problematic for the ecosystem. The change in habitat, which is actually the place where living organisms enjoy their life, is highly affected by rising temperatures. Rising temperatures also affect the nature of species interactions by changing the requirements of resources. The higher temperatures could also affect the ecosystem functioning by altering species interactions and complementary effects. Temperature changes the rate of metabolism in living organisms. So the behavior tends to change after that. We've also noticed the impact of climate change on health. Scientific evidence shows an increase in vector-borne and waterborne diseases, which is attributed to poor hygiene and sanitation practices due to extreme weather events, flooding and water scarcity. Encroachment of vector-borne diseases, for instance, malaria has been evident in the middle veld, and this encroachment has been more prevalent in the low veld. Climate-induced mental conditions influenced by forced migration, displacement, and shifting sector dependency in terms of agriculture have been reported in Eswatini. This is a very interesting observation here. These are the physiographic zones of the Kingdom of Eswatini. On the far east is what we call the Ubombo Plateau, and in the middle is what we have as low veld and middle veld, and then in the far west in red we have what we call the high veld. So the trend here, or what is happening, is that we have a malaria control unit within the Ministry of Health that has been monitoring malaria in the country. Their main responsibility has always been in the low veld and middle veld, where they've had to go to individual homesteads and spray the houses in order to prevent malaria or to kill mosquitoes. What we are observing now is that this is slowly changing. As the temperatures are increasing, malaria is becoming more and more available in the high altitude areas or parts of the country in the high veld. So now this is forcing us to change the way in which we do things or the way in which we control malaria. As far as infrastructure is concerned, the impact of climate change has been clearly observed. I will just mention a few cases here, although there may be others where the destruction of infrastructure includes buildings, roads, and road maintenance can be extremely expensive for countries. This is a specific example where the electricity company in Eswatini spent over 40 million emalangeni, which is about 10 million or 5 million US dollars, in repairing infrastructure after we've had a very, very serious storm in 2021. Evidence reveals, in terms of agriculture, the impact in agriculture, evidence reveals that the country has experienced shifts in planting season, as well as frequent and unfavorable incidences of food insecurity that were largely attributed to droughts and extended dry spells. Significant rainfall, deficits, or cessation at critical stages of crop growth have frequently led to the serious shortfall in crop production, especially maize, the staple food of Eswatini. What we are noticing here is that there is a huge threat towards our food security. Now, when you are dealing with farmers, especially the small-scale farmers, My ministry, which is the Ministry of Agriculture, gets to a point where it has to sit down and spend some time with the farmers to try and explain to them the impact of climate change. We've had those discussions, but here, remember that we are dealing with mindsets. People are telling us that we have been living in this area all these years, and this is how we've been doing our agriculture. So why should we change now? We are aware of the reasons why they should change, and we try and explain to them, but you know, it is not a very simple process. A number of meetings have had to be held to try and convince them to change the crops that they are growing in their areas so that maybe they can get a better yield. This has reached a point where the impact has to be somehow met halfway by government. Government has had to subsidize the production of maize in the country. Last year, the cost of maize production was calculated to be around $390 per hectare. And this would yield about 6 to 8 tons of maize. Then government decided that, okay, clearly the small-scale farmers were now facing difficulty in buying inputs, so government introduced the farm input subsidy program. The ratio of subsidy was 50%, meaning that the small-scale farmer would pay 50% and the rest would be paid by government. Only last year. This year, the situation turned out to be completely different. Due to scarcity of synthetic fertilizers, the production rate escalated to $780 per hectare. Now, this is a big challenge for the country. We've tried to improve the way we subsidize, and now government increased the subsidy from 50% to 65% and reduced the farmers' costs to 35%. Now, sustainability of the subsidized inputs is not certain anymore. We have clearly reached a point where we are wondering if next year we will be in a position to provide this kind of subsidy for our farmers. The other impact that climate change has would be the escalation of wildfires, reduced rainfall with lengthy dry spells and increased evaporation, increased frequency and intensity of floods and storms, and increased temperatures will all negatively impact the agriculture sector of Eswatini, where about 75% of the population is rural and practices subsistence farming. The weather has become completely erratic. We are not in a position to determine what is going to happen, whether we will have a drought or whether we'll have excess rains, and then we end up with flooding. It is very, very unpredictable. Prospects for livestock sector are mixed as the sector continues to be vulnerable to erratic weather conditions, with some areas even becoming semi-arid and to be impacted by diseases brought by climate change. The 2015-2016 El Nino event led to a high livestock mortality rate of about 8% in Eswatini. Now, if you understand how the people of the Kingdom of Eswatini love their cattle, you would be surprised how big a number 8% is. And that would be estimated to a value of 264 million malangeni, or $20 million. Now, how do we implement mitigation and adaptation in the country? Clearly, the availability of geospatial information is of critical importance. We need to come up with legal frameworks that must be put in place to safeguard availability and usage of geospatial information. We need to develop institutional frameworks that must be set up to ensure data standards and interoperability and accessibility of geospatial information. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, may I simply say that the use of geospatial information in meeting our needs as a country on our path to adapt to climatic conditions that are changing. We want to say that the establishment of an IGIF in developing countries in particular is a key step towards realizing economic growth. If we ignore these technologies, then we might end up with even bigger challenges. The observation that the attainment of sustainable development goals would be hampered by the lack of IGIF is a breakthrough and a game changer. When we were negotiating with leadership in the country, trying to explain the significance of the integrated geospatial information framework, sometimes we would have difficulty. But after realizing that sustainable development goals are actually ambitions for every developing country, because that would make them meet the requirements of every citizen in the country. Now, this has made geospatial information very much recognizable, even at higher levels of government. The nature of geospatial information is cross-cutting in most sectors, and therefore should be considered before development projects are implemented. There is a tendency in our developing countries to think that, or to underplay the value of geospatial information. We go ahead planning projects, even big ones, without thinking of where we are going to get the geospatial information, whether it will be of good quality or not. So this is one point that I would like to emphasize as probably developing countries, that let us look and take care of our geospatial information in order to make sure that when we need it in our developmental projects, then it will be available. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sydney, for this passionate presentation of the urgency with which we have to pay attention to this major global challenge of climate change, and by bringing it home in so concrete examples of what that means for a country like yours. So I will now take advantage for a few minutes of engaging here in a discussion with the panel, and that can hopefully give you also a moment to reflect what questions you may want to ask, and then we will go, of course, to the audience and give you an opportunity to ask your questions. But let me perhaps start here. There were a couple of thoughts that were really going through all the presentations here. We have to work together, partnerships, and so a new ecosystem. And my question, perhaps my first question, is how do we best work together, organize ourselves concretely at the country level? I mean, how do we bring all of the various government sector agencies together and the private sector and other stakeholders? How can we make sure that the right people work together in the right way in order to address all of these serious global challenges? So perhaps a couple of your thoughts on that topic. We can start with you, Deirdre.
Thank you, Stefan. I think a good way to bring people together is by starting with those that you already know. In the United States, we have a robust spatial data infrastructure. We have many federal organizations who are very good at aggregating data, producing data, and disseminating data within their silos. We haven't yet had an opportunity to work together to integrate amongst those silos and bring the data sets together. I think technology and the tools, the geoportals, the web applications that are available today are going to propel us to do that. At the Census Bureau, I am intending to reach out to my colleagues in NOAA, in the USGS, those colleagues that I already have relationships with, and say, how can we do this? I believe one way is through the development of a country-level action plan and the IGIF. Start with people we know, start looking at the strengths, the weaknesses, identify our gaps, and then take the next step together. And as we build those partnerships, those bonds, we can bring more people to the table.
No, thank you, and also thank you. I always say that for a representative of a highly developed country, that we all often, many countries look at for being so brave to openly admit that they're not, all the problems are not automatically solved. On the contrary, I mean, some of the classical problems that we all seem to have a human tendency to hide ourselves in our comfortable silos, they exist at all levels and for all countries, and they have to be overcome. So thank you for sharing that. Albert, how do we bring the private sector at the country level into this conversation with the government agencies?
Yes, thank you, Stefan. I would say the first part is not having assumptions, not assuming anything. Usually when the government want to work with the private sector, they have this nice expression that they call private sector engagement. And usually it's a top to bottom approach. They look down at the private sector and they invite them and say, this is what we want to do, because of course all the thinkers are in the government, they are not in the private sector. So this is what we plan to do, this is how we're going to do it, and this is what you're going to do if you want to work with us. And that's not the way to start a partnership, right? A partnership means you engage users or partners earlier, you share ideas with partners, and you co-develop or you co-design, whatever you want to accomplish. And when it comes to developing countries, I think the main mistake there is ignoring the local private sector. It's extremely important to engage with the local private sector, and if you think that you don't have enough, maybe that's where you need to work, in creating a viable local private sector, because multinational companies, as much as we want to be part of the solution, as much as we like working with local government, with government of developing countries, it's always extremely difficult for us if we don't have any relay in the country. And that's why more and more we are also helping building that base of a viable local private sector. So that will be my take. So first of all, engaging the private sector early in the process, not assuming that they are there just for the money, because they have other motivation to be part of a solution, and like I say, making sure that the local private sector is considered.
Thank you very much for sharing these important thoughts. Sydney, now you are a politician. Now you have to organize this and have to make it happen. So how do you find the right people in your country? How do you get them together and make them work together?
Thank you so much, Stefan. I think really one can never overemphasize the power of partnerships. Partnerships are critical in the sense that they identify and classify stakeholders of similar interests, and this provides duplication of data, and then you can combine your efforts and focus on the production of that particular data set you are looking for. The nature of geospatial information, as I might have mentioned earlier on, is cross-cutting. So you might be thinking, my interests are on this particular aspect of geospatial information, and only to find that somebody else somewhere has a similar interest. Now brings a situation whereby they might decide to join hands together and maybe pay for that collection of that data together. And really, this also helps in avoiding these silos we are talking about, whereby you find somebody has compiled a lot of data that they will not be even be able to use And at some point in time, somebody else needs that data. We don't even know who owns what. So I would say developing partnerships is really important because it helps us to communicate amongst the users, and ultimately we can share the cost for the data collection or whatever we want to do with the data. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. And I have a second question, something that bothers me all the time, is we all agree on the need for good data and ecosystems and sharing information and so, but to do that we need resources. And so I sometimes wonder, why is it so difficult for us as a technical community to convince other people that we're producing good information and there is a need out there? Why does it seem so difficult to make that connection? Why aren't people throwing money at us and saying, yeah, do more of this because we need that really? What is happening here? What do we need to do differently? And what do we need to do better in the future? I'm sure we have all struggled for resources, so I'm sure you all have ideas about it, or perhaps you, from a private sector perspective, you can give us some advice of how we articulate our value proposition a little bit better.
Yes, this is always a challenge. How do we acquire the resources that we need to get the job done? I think so many of us started as technicians, studied geography, studied GIS, began our careers sitting behind the computers making the maps, and then as we grew, we advanced in our careers and ended up in leadership and management positions. But we still remember those days sitting behind the computer screen. Through the course of my career, I've learned that it helps to tell the story that appeals to the audience. And so, for example, the new director of the Census Bureau is from San Antonio, Texas. Instead of going to him during the first demonstration with a map of my hometown and using the integration of the geospatial and the statistical data there to tell the story, I went with the example of his hometown. And this resonated for him and immediately caught his interest. I don't think it would have been the same if I went with my comfort level, right? So think about how you tell the story.
Communication, communication, communication. We had that in the previous panel also. So the private sector, they know how to. They are smart because they have understood the value of data, because I mean, you are investing into data because it's your pathway to the future. And so, what are we doing wrong in the public sector?
I mean, forget about what's happening at Wall Street now. But if you look at the past 10 years, 10, 15 years, all the geospatial companies are doing very well, right? Because of two things. The shift to data, because that's where the money is. Data is, you know, people will say the new gold, and it's important to find ways to monetize data. And the geospatial data is probably one of the most valued data out there. And location-based services that just started less than 10 years ago. Almost every single company that provide location-based services, I mean, up until early this year, every single company was doing very good. And the reason, once again, is because of making the data the center of their value proposition. So yes, that would be the answer. So how do we monetize what we have? How do we monetize data? How do we monetize the technology? And more, it's not about having hardware, right? Almost every aspect of the geospatial world is less hardware, more software, more analytics on data. And obviously, you know, that's where the money is, that's where the value proposition should go.
Sydney?
Thank you, Stefan. I think governments have a huge responsibility of bringing together stakeholders in terms of geospatial information. Government has to create awareness of the significance or importance of geospatial information. And then this will ensure that even the private sector participates because they know what they will benefit from this. Private sector is business oriented. So once they see that there's nothing to benefit from this, then definitely they will pull away. So I just want to give you an interesting example that we are currently working on in Eswatini. We are an agro-based industry, like I have said, but our mainstay is sugarcane, and then we also have forestry. Those are huge companies in the country that, probably generate most of our revenue. But what is happening is this. Each one of these companies working in their small corner there, they get or they take aerial photography because they are interested in their areas to monitor whether it be crops or their plantations. And they're doing it separately. Everybody is spending maybe about $1 million a year on this and that. So what we're trying to do now is to talk to these companies and say to them, if you can give us your 1 million, and then the other company gives us their 1 million again, and then we combine the resources and map the whole country. This will not only provide a service to those who had paid the 1 million, but even the other parts of the country that will need to be covered in this aerial photography will also benefit. Thank you.
And does it work? Have they thrown $1 million at you yet, or we will hear this. We will continue that following you, because I know you are part also of the I think SDG Data Alliance project. So I think we will have an opportunity to watch how this evolves. I'm sure you have questions, so let's turn to the audience. I see some people jumping up, and that's how we want it to be. There is a lady standing there at the microphone, so please, perhaps you can also say who you are and what institution or organization you represent. And if your question is to one of the panels specifically, please also clarify that. Thank you.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. This is Aditi Sharma, and I have been serving as a senior veterinary officer in animal husbandry department in India. So I don't know whether whatever I'm going to ask the people would be comfortable by accepting that fact or not, because many times we don't talk of the failures. But what I have conceived over the time is that we learn more with the failures rather than the success stories. But whenever we present anything on the international, national, and other important forums, it's mainly the success stories. So regarding the first presentation, I would like to request Madam that in the innovative pathways slide, when you were talking about the healthcare, so I could see a number of things, heart diseases, then respiratory, obesity, diabetes, and a lot of things. But I would like to request you that, if possible, can you please include zoonotic diseases also in that? Because as you know that almost 60% of the diseases, the infectious diseases, are zoonotic. And if we go further, then out of 4, we have 3 diseases which are of the animal origin. So we cannot afford to skip that aspect of the healthcare. And regarding the second presentation, I would like to give a submission that whenever we talk about the agriculture industry, we also talk about the animal husbandry industry along with it, because it's all integrated. In your slide, in the transforming agriculture industry, if you can put some information about what transformation can be done in the animal husbandry industry or the wildlife trade industry, then I think the people who are working for the animal husbandry would be more benefited. And regarding the third presentation, I would like to congratulate that I'm happy to see that as you're a political personality, but you are well aware of the healthcare aspect also, and you have projected that the climate change has led to more vector-borne diseases and the epidemics. And I very well support that, of course, the budget constraint is there. So to all of you three speakers, I don't want to ask separately because until unless collaboration and coordination is there, we cannot have the solution. So can you please comment on this aspect?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps we can collect one or two more questions, and then, yes, there's a question over there.
Yeah, good afternoon. This is Dr. Akhtar Ali from Osmania University, a geographer. My simple question to Mr. Albert and Mr. Sydney is that he has talked about this subsidize and subsidy and then 50% from government, and later on he talked about 65%. In these developing countries and in the developed countries, what I'm coming across is that people want to remove this subsidy and then they want directly all that private entrepreneurs to come into it. So can you put proper light on that? Is it advisable or the government need to be there into it? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Perhaps we have one more there, and then we can give the floor back to the panelists to react to some of the questions here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you all the panelists, and the presentations were excellent. As Stephens has already commented, ma'am is really fit for the global ambassador for this gigantic task that UNWGIC. Since you are working in our Chief Geographic Division, US Census Bureau, I have a very specific question because one of your slides showed that the statistical data plus the geospatial data and gives a lot of powerful tools. I just want to know, because I'm also working for bilateral trade asymmetry with US Census Bureau. I'm leading from the India side, co-chair with. So how integrated for USA statistical data, and since both are in the UN Census Bureau, so US Census Bureau in USA, how integrated? Very specific question for you, ma'am. For other panelists, thank you very much. It was a fantastic learning experience. Thank you. I'm Prafulla Mishra, Statistical Advisor, Government of India.
Thank you very much. I think perhaps we can just give the panel an opportunity to react to these questions. Deirdre, you're sitting right next to me. You always get to go first.
Okay, thank you. To the woman who asked the first question, I think I can answer both parts of her question with one answer. Specifically to the communication that's necessary to enable the work we do. Let's think back to the presentation and how we worked together in Central America. We brought together 6 of the 7 countries to, it started, integrate information about education, income, migration with the geographic data. That was the idea of the original project. But very soon we were faced with the global pandemic, and we decided we better turn to develop a vulnerability index. The beauty of what came out of that project was new relationships between statistical offices and geospatial offices within country, across country, and a model that now can be used to bring different variables to the table. So it doesn't have to be COVID-19, it can be the different diseases that this woman asked about. A good example of integrating the statistical data, the geospatial data to provide results with a lot of communication along the way.
Did you want to say something about the U.S., or the question about how the U.S. Census Bureau, how you integrate just statistical and geospatial information?
Yes, thank you. The geographic and statistical data at the Census Bureau in the United States is entirely integrated. We build the foundation in the geography division at the Census Bureau that allows for all of the data collection, processing, tabulation, and dissemination to occur. We do that at all different levels of geography, from the nation to the state to the county, city, town, place, and then down to the statistical geographies, with the lowest level being the block. It's pretty seamless.
Thank you. Albert, did you want to react to one of the questions, please? Yeah.
Yes, the question was if when we have solutions for agriculture, if we also think of animals, and the answer is yes. Both some of the ag solutions in geospatial and water solutions will have impact in animals. And when we mention climate smart agriculture, usually it's both sides. It's not only agriculture; it's also for animals. And I know of projects where they map water, for example, to know exactly where they can bring animals to access water. So there are many solutions that can be that exist where you use geospatial solution in agriculture in general, not only agriculture but also animals.
Thank you. And just to mention, biodiversity is, of course, one of the big policy challenge. Maintaining biodiversity, preserving it, is one of the big policy agendas, of course. And we are just in the process of developing indicators on how to measure that more effectively. Sydney, there was a question about the subsidy policies.
Thank you, Stefan. I will try and respond to both questions, if I may. I'll start with the relationship between veterinary services and maybe health issues. The Ministry of Agriculture in our country and the Ministry of Health, they work closely, very closely with each other, and we have a very good working relationship, because we realize that the impact, for instance, that climate change has on livestock would probably be similar to what the fate that would be suffered by people. So we really have a good working relationship. Sometimes we often joke and say that if they can give us, as Minister of Agriculture, enough resources to provide good nutrition for every person in the country or citizen, then there will be less and less visits to hospitals. But there is a very strong working relationship. In terms of the subsidy, the question on subsidies are not intended to be a permanent source of livelihood. Subsidies are there mainly as an intervention when you realize that the country has been hard hit maybe by drought, or as we're talking about effects of climate change, then government intervenes. Even then, when we intervene, the good understanding or the important understanding is that this is a phase that should pass. People are being trained one way or the other so that we make sure that they can survive later on without the assistance of government. We have also realized that when there's a challenge in the country, it is not the big agricultural institutions or big farmers that rescue the country. It is the small-scale farmers that come in very handy. So as a result, we are very sensitive to their needs. We really want to make sure that they are self-sustainable, and we want to make sure that if there is a challenge in the country, like I mentioned, the shortage of synthetic fertilizers, the feeling is that we then need to come in and rescue them, because we tend to think that it's a temporary situation that will pass, and they must be able to survive on their own later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions? Yes, I see a question
Yes.
over here.
Good evening, sir. Within 4 days, we are just attending. We are speaking so much about this technology, geospatial technology. But I just want to add that maybe we are missing, I'm not very sure, that a major stakeholder, that is our farmers, especially in countries like India and other Asia-Pacific countries. I'm not concerned about US or other advanced countries of Europe, but I'm more concerned about Africa, like our India and Asia-Pacific countries, where the stakeholders, major stakeholders, are farmers. They do not know about AI. They do not know about precision agriculture. So could we expect that this platform we can use to educate one of the major stakeholders? And Mr. Stephen was telling about communication. Yes, that communication is required to build up the bridge between the technology and the people. I am Dr. Swagata Chatterjee from NATMO, India's only premium thematic mapping organization. But sir, it's a request that this platform can be an emerging tool or emerging platform to educate the stakeholders.
Thank you.
Who are
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think I see a question all the way over there.
Yeah, hello. It's audible? Okay, fine. Good morning, sir. My questions to you, Mr. Albert. Your slide that you have shared is fantastic and actually brings us the real-time solutions. My concern is when the government is ready to share their all data, you actually understand the potential of the geographic locations data. Actually, it brings lots of business for you. So what are the policy that you are actually following? Where the data manipulation is very, very hectic and it can bring huge solutions. And my concern to Sydney, sir, as a government, should we deploy any committee or any persons to regulate our data?
Thank you. I see a question over there.
So I'm TP Singh from Symbiosis International University. My question is that we are really having climate extreme or extreme climate situation and require a digital transformation. When we are looking for that indicators, global indicators, it would be difficult to understand about how to work with global challenges. Require that to work at a local level. How we are doing to develop such kind of indicators, a local indicator, which are going to be make the database a strong database to transformation of a digital data set. First question. And the second question is, to develop such kind of the capacity development, is that we are working certain kind of university network system where no such capacity building we are providing to the geospatial, under the geospatial framework. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any further question?
Thank you for the chance. I'm Ioannis from Ethiopia, Adama Science and Technology University. And my question touches two parts. One is from food security part, and the other is health. The Millennium Development Goals 2 talks about the food security, but in East Africa in general, and in Ethiopia in particular, we are suffering from recurrent drought problems. But we have opportunities that can be translated into action. For example, we have 13 months of sunshine, which is a source of solar energy, and in very lowland areas. And in highland areas, we have high potential surface, both surface and groundwater. The problem is how to integrate using this geospatial information is the main problem. And the other is malaria case. especially different strains are seen in...
Can you please speak directly in the microphone, and it's easier for us to hear?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Different strains are being seen recently in Djibouti and Dreddawa area in East Ethiopia. And are we really, do we have collective willing to overcome those mentioned two problems in order to attain the sustainable development goals that we set being together? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think I don't see any raised hand at this moment. And quickly, now we are at the end of the session, and I want to give every panelist an opportunity to reply. If you could be precise and short.
It's not, okay. This is Jude Khattab, UNDP Syria. We heard from private sector and public sector point of view. We as a UN agencies, do you have any advice or do you have any success stories to make the implementation of UN agencies more geo-enabled? Do you have any success stories? Or if you, you said, Stefan, and no, we are now thinking how to implement IGIF into our programming. So do you have any advice to do this? Thank you.
Yes, the immediate advice that I may have is to go to the next session after lunch, because there is a session with all the UN agencies and the private sector, and I will be speaking there if you haven't had enough of me yet. So I think that would be a good platform to discuss that. But we had some good questions here. I think I have to close this now. And I give the floor back one more time to all the panelists to answer some of the questions, and perhaps any final thoughts that you may have or something that you want to share before we close this very rich plenary session. So Deidre, we have made so many good experiences with you starting first. I will not break that tradition.
Thank you, Stefan. This is a hard one to answer, the combination of all those questions, but I'll try just by suggesting a lot of what we heard today had to do with the availability of different data sets, the integration of those data sets to answer complex questions that we're all struggling with. I believe working through the steps associated with the IGIF will give us an opportunity to build a strong foundation that allows us to answer those questions. And there are many of us here in the room that participate on the high-level group of the IGIF. We're working to provide strategic direction and leadership. And if you have specific questions, please feel free to approach us during the remainder of the conference.
Thank you very much. Albert?
Yes, I'm going to try to answer some of the questions that were asked. First, on small farmers. Yes, we do have solutions for them, and unfortunately I couldn't expand more, especially on climate smart agriculture. Is really towards small farmers, and there are many examples even here in India where I can show you how geospatial technology has helped with small farmers, and even insurance companies now are relying on information coming from geospatial companies in order to provide things like crop insurance. But we can talk more about it. Yeah, there are really solutions for you. And the one asking questions about the Horn of Africa, same thing there. I mean, I don't know if people know this, but for the past 2-3 years, a country like Ethiopia has had one of the worst droughts that they've ever been through. But you never hear any "we are the world" or things of that nature. The reality is they were able to, I would say, successfully, fight the drought because of the information coming from the geospatial community. There are so many models that have been developed in order to predict drought, in order to do better when it comes to predictive analysis. So, and my final thought of the conversation is, I think the private sector is ready. The private sector is innovative. The private sector wants to work with you as long as you accept working with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the questions, ladies and gentlemen. I think I will end just by maybe summarizing a little bit on the questions that were asked here. I am realizing that an approach of handling climate change challenges and as an individual country or state has so many challenges. We really need to take a global approach towards this. We need to have regional meetings and discuss these issues, because it is very likely to find that one of the challenges you are experiencing, they're just coming from a neighboring country. So you find that we need to consider our transboundary challenges and then look at a holistic approach, which will be a global approach, and see how we can handle these challenges, because that is when we will be able to provide a solution by bringing together ideas and experiences from various parts of the world so that we can come up with a complete solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Well, dear colleagues, I promised you a strong panel with very different perspectives. I think that's exactly what you got. So may I please ask you to give our panelists a strong hand of applause. And thank you very much to you. And Deirdre opened a very dangerous door. There's a very special form of human rights abuse. It's called panelist abuse. She said, if you see her in the corridor, and we still have a couple of days, and I'm sure my other panelists, they smilingly agree to the same form of abuse. If you want to elaborate the one or other thought or share another additional questions, that's why we are here together. So then all that's left for me is to say thank you. Thank you to you for your interest, for coming. Thank you.